Hello, everybody. It is Monday, and I think today is the 93rd episode of 62 Who Knew. We're rapidly approaching our 2-year anniversary, and we're going to be planning something very special for that. I have no idea what that is, but it does give me 9 weeks to figure it out, so we're okay. Anyway, welcome today. We have two of our favorite panelists on and a brand new guest, which I'm going to introduce to you in about 3 or 4 minutes. I want to thank last week's guests, of course. Every week, our viewership continues to go up. Last week, we had a little more than 74,000 viewers. Thank you all so much. As you know, also, we are now being, since the 1st of January, simulcast on several different platforms as a podcast in addition to this television show. And those likes and those shares and those downloads are going up every week. So thank you all to our audience and to our great guests for continuing to allow us to grow. So this is going to be a great show. But before I get to that, I always like to give a little synopsis of what 62 Who Knew truly is, why it has gained popularity in the last 92 weeks. And we always have X amount of thousands, hundreds or maybe thousands of new guests every week. So I'd like to give you just a little synopsis of what this show is all about. So as you approach 62, pretty much everyone, from myself, who was 62 almost 9 months ago at this point, to my father, to his father, your father, their fathers, everybody pretty much has the same thoughts as they approach 62. You might have them in your mid-50s, your early 60s, but we all have the same thoughts. Have I saved enough money? Do I need life insurance? Should I continue my present life insurance? Should I have bought long-term care insurance by now? Wasn't I planning to have my house paid off? Should I take Social Security at 62? Or should I keep working and defer to later in my life? The questions are endless, and they're always the same. They've been the same for generations, except for my generation, the generation that has been turning 62 years old for the last several years, and the generation that will be having 10,000 people a day continue to turn 62 years old in the United States of America for the next 12 to 15 years. Our generation has a different question. Our generation, to put it another way, has a different hurdle to jump over. And what is that hurdle? Longer lifespans. There is no doubt that in the last 30 years, the last 3 to 4 decades, modern science, technologies, medical breakthroughs have happened at such a rapid rate, whereas my father and grandfather planned on living till their 70s, today's retiree very well can plan on living into their 90s. In fact, according to the AMA, the American Medical Association, if you live to be 62 in this country and you're a married couple, you have better than a 50-50 chance of one of you making it into their 90s. So who knew at 62 that you still had 30 more years to go? That's half the time you've been here. And in this great country that we live in, less than 1% of the population can retire in their early 60s, go another 3 decades in a lifestyle of quality that allows them to live with dignity and the way they want to live, quite frankly, without giving up anything after so many years of work during their retirement years. There is no doubt that longer lifespans is a great thing, but it's also a double-edged sword. And that's what 62 Who Knew is about. Every week we bring on a different specialist, the finest long-term care insurance people in the country, professionals that speak throughout the country and educate throughout the country, reverse mortgage specialists, annuity specialists, Medicare and Medicaid specialists. And again, our list goes on and on. And obviously the public has taken to it because we have built in this independent station of WeBeam TV, little shameless plug, owned and operated by Mr. John Gaston. If you are interested in having your own TV show, you got to call WeBeam TV. It's a great platform. For me, it's grown to to over 70,000 viewers per week. But that's what 62 Who Knew is about. And for all of you that have been watching, thank you so much again. For those of you that are just watching for the first time, now you know what you're here to see. So let's go to our guests without further ado. One of them was running late, and I can see is still not there, but that's okay. On the left, on your screen, or my left, you can see one of the 62 Who Knew family has become a regular panelist, Mr. Peter Gelbwax. Thank you for being here, Peter. Seems like you've been
my pleasure, Mike.
You've been here.
So John will let Mark in.
Well, maybe we don't want to let Mark in. No, we really want to let Mark in, but he's having some technology issues. And, that early dementia isn't working well for Mark, but that's for another show altogether. Let's not discuss that now. Let's discuss tonight's guest, because not only is tonight's guest very well accomplished, I have to say in the 92 weeks that we've been doing this is our first, quite frankly, real politician, a man that served 8 years in the House of Representatives representing his district in Florida. And I'm going to enjoy this on many, many levels. Also in the insurance world and fought to help. I'm going to give a little bio here. And just an absolute great guest. It's 62 Who Knew at its best. You've heard me say that before. And let me think just for a second. How did I meet this man? Let me think. He was introduced to me by Peter Gelbwax. For those of you that don't watch the show a lot, I would actually only know my children and grandchildren. That would be the only people I know in the United States of America if it wasn't for Peter Gelbwax. It's really staggering. I mean, when the paper guy throws the paper on my lawn, he goes, didn't Peter introduce you to me? I go, yeah, I think so. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Mr. Richard. He prefers to be called Rick Stark. And let me tell you a little bit about this man. This is a fraction of his bio. Rick has been a longtime small businessman and community leader in South Florida. Rick made the transition from community activist to candidate for state representative so he could move this state in the right direction by restoring adequate funding for public education, providing affordable, quality health care to Floridians, bringing jobs to our state, and fighting for the values that have made America great. Although he probably wants to change that particular part of it because this was written several years ago, I think. So I'm not sure he was part of making America great in the way that we're used to it, in the bad way. He was part of it in the good way. Let me be clear on that. In 2012, Rick was elected to the Florida House of Representatives for District 104, which includes western parts of Pembroke Pines, Southwest Ranches, and Davie. He has served on several committees on education, appropriations, military and veterans, highway and waterway safety, and the Affordable Care Act. And it goes on, but our hour goes so quickly, as our viewers and our guests know, that I want to bring him on right now. So, Mr. Stark, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, my campaign T-shirts were red at one time also. So aside from the Make America Great, who knew that that was going to change, that somewhere in my 8 years in the House of Representatives, symbols were going to change a little bit. Yeah. Peter was actually one of my original supporters. We had talked for many, many years about insurance agents who are the closest to the public, when it comes to insurance items, which includes, long-term care and, Medicare and financial planning and all those things, certainly closer than the insurance companies, certainly closer than the politicians. So we lobbied Tallahassee and Washington for many years about things were very important. I mean, we had, I worked with Peter on legislation going back, 20 years ago, where we got the, we changed how long-term care insurance works. Now, did we think that that the market was going to be so completely different now than it was back then? Probably not. And you mentioned it before about the ages of people. I mean, I know you mentioned it in the trailer for the show. My dad, if he made it to March, was going to be 101 years old. And who would have thought that we were going to have so many people their 80s and their 90s. And so, Peter, I do want to thank you for helping me early on to get elected. And I really did quite a lot. We talked about the bills I worked on, but actually I worked on insurance bills while I was in the legislature as well. Got a few passed on there. And that was very important for our industry to work on legislation, because I can't go by Democrat and Republican. We really never know what the political sides are going to do to something, to an issue we think is very, very important. We've got to speak to both sides, and it's important to get everybody, included, to do the right thing when it comes to insurance. And of course, you're going to see this year, because I just got my homeowner's bill. It went up from it went up over 50%.
Oh my
God.
God.
I can tell some of you out there just being on the lookout for your renewal of your homeowners. And it's going to be in the news a lot. It's already been in the news quite a bit. Now I'm going to stop talking. I don't want to be talking here on nonstop for 30 minutes. I'd rather you ask me questions or ask stuff that I've worked on and how it affects insurance or whatever other topics we spoke about earlier.
With your incredible background, we have a lot of great things to ask you. One thing that's interesting, I Googled it while you were speaking. I think you got somewhere around a couple of 100,000 votes when you went to the state representative. And I read in Google that actually Peter introduced you to each one of those couple of 100,000.
Well,
it was
if anybody can do it, Peter would be the one to do it.
I thought that was amazing. And it was in Google, and the Google knows all. And now joining us late because his private jet just got in, Mr. Mark Goldberg, one of our favorite panelists, part of the 62 Who Knew family from show one. My first guest. We just love this having this man here on a personal and professional level. Thank you.
It is my honor and pleasure, Mike, but you didn't tell me you were setting me up with all these ringers.
I know.
You've got the Tom Brady of long-term care pass and Peter Gelbwaks. Mm-hmm. You've got the Tom Brady of representatives for the House here in Florida in Mr. Stark. And you got the Tom Brady of reverse mortgages in yourself. What am I, the water boy?
No, you're the man. You're the man that keeps it all together.
I don't know. I feel like this is a setup. I've been put. That's okay. I think I can take the heat.
He says it's okay.
So,
I think Vince Lombardi, but he's gone. So
that's right.
Yeah. Well, he made an appearance several times last night. Did you see that?
Well, that was cool, wasn't it?
A hologram just like him.
Wasn't that cool? I thought that was
Peter,
cool.
you supported Mr. Stark to get elected. You helped him in his election campaign.
Oh yeah.
He did.
We covered that.
Let's talk serious before we run out of time.
Yes.
Mike, why don't
That's what I'm going to do is ask a question seriously because of what you did. So go ahead. You ask the first, and then I want to ask a serious question to Mr. Stark.
Oh, good. I always ask the same question when someone's here for the first time, no matter what. And that is, as an insurance person, a career person, what made you go from an active community person, to a community, a real community activist, from a businessman to running for the state for the House of State Representatives? What was your emotion? What was involved to get you to go from very successful businessman, obviously into a public life in politics that had to take time away from your successful business? What was your emotion? What was your motivation to do that?
You could always figure there's certain things that reasons that people run. I mean, I knew that I wanted to run for public office when I was in sixth grade. But I think the thing that really propelled me was that going into the insurance business after 1990, I got licensed in 1990. We're a very regulated business. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have anybody that I felt did what we do, what Peter does, what I do, which is more on the life side, health insurance, long-term care, things like that, that actually represented us in the Florida legislature. There were things that weren't being heard. There's always bad legislation coming out. I mean, some of the things that I worked on, my first year there, I worked on something regarding, life insurance, and that life insurance should never turn you down because you have a genetic disposition to do something. I got shot down in 2 seconds. They didn't want to hear the bill. Somebody else ran that bill this year and it passed.
Oh,
so that means that if the insurance company discovers something in your medical record, which was from a genetic disposition, you don't have any symptoms or nothing going on with that now, they can't turn you down for that.
That's great.
And the insurance companies weren't particularly crazy about it, but I said, back then I said, well, why turn them down? I mean, if you really want to rate the policy up so they don't want to buy it, you can do it. But I mean, for God's sakes, don't turn somebody down because you think they might get something because you saw something on Ancestry.com.
Yeah.
But the short reason is that so many people, you get what we call the bug. You just feel that you can make things better. Now, there is one other thing, too, though. Something tragic that happens to somebody. Look at the folks from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Maury Alhadoff that lost a daughter, ran for the school board. Debbie Hickson, who lost her husband.
Yes.
She ran and was elected also to the school board. And I think you're going to see, some more of that. And that's not the first time, we've seen that. People, something tragic happens and they said, something's not getting done and I'm going to go and do it.
Right. Well,
for me, I always thought I could make a difference, but also insurance really propelled me, certainly wanting to do the right thing for our industry that sometimes doesn't get the right thing done to.
Absolutely. And Mark, before we go to you to ask your question, I know that you, Rick, have recently suffered a great loss. You lost your dad just a couple of months before his 101st birthday, which is just staggering. God bless him. And we're so sorry for your loss.
Well,
did you lose him to COVID, Rick, or something else?
Yeah. I haven't really been public about it, but both of my parents got sick at the same time. And my dad lived through World War II. He lived through invasions. He really had quite a life. Had his bar mitzvah during the Depression. So what can I tell you? He really, America's greatest generation. But he was declining rapidly at the end. I don't know how much longer he would have lived. But the coronavirus, he didn't last a week. My mother got this at the same time. They were both living at home, really didn't go out. He couldn't even go out. But she was in the hospital and skilled nursing for over 3 weeks. She's now going on her third week at home recuperating. Never bad enough to have a respirator. They don't keep you in a hospital. I certainly learned a lot of things about what kind of hospital treatment you get, if you go into the emergency room thinking you have COVID. And I can tell you, if it ain't severe enough, in almost all cases, they kick you out. I was lucky to get her into skilled nursing facility. My dad, he was in hospice. I take that back. I had to send him to hospice, once he was diagnosed, and it didn't last too long. And right now I got to worry about care for my mom.
Of course.
I know I heard in your pre-thing about, about long-term care. Thank God they both had it. I don't know that I had enough for them, but they both have it. Now my mom is having to use hers.
Right.
93, and she's using hers for the very first time.
Fantastic.
That's all I can tell you right now, but it was something. And I can't just tell you how tragic it is and what it's like to be a child that has to make these kind of decisions for your parents, basically life and death decisions, and where to get them care and all sorts of. I mean, I had to scramble fast. And I had just come off a political campaign, 8 years in the Florida legislature, and then this is what's going on right around New Year's.
Right. Well, we certainly wish you our deepest condolences on your loss, and hopefully in 7 years, when this show is called 69 and I'm still feeling fine, we'll be celebrating your mother. I just made that up. That was pretty good.
Peter and I will take 69.
Yes,
take 62 again.
Yeah. But hopefully we'll be celebrating. You'll be on the show and we'll be saying happy birthday to Mom on her 100th birthday.
Okay.
All right. Mark, you said you had a question for Rick.
Yeah, I did. But Peter said he had one first, so I don't want to get Peter's way there.
Age before beauty.
No
Okay.
idea.
No? Okay, Mark, you're first.
All right. Rick, among other things, I am a co-founder of what was the Got Milk campaign for long-term care, which was called the 3 and 4 Need More campaign. And I spent, also thanks to Mr. Gelbach's support, so we have that in common. He was a very big advocate of helping us launch that campaign. I spent a considerable amount of time in D.C. trying to push the awareness of the problems, because of the ever-increasing demand for long-term care. And I found I was living in a through-the-looking-glass kind of world. Everybody was only concerned with things that would either impact in the next 2 years, the next 4 years, or the next 6 years. It had no interest in anything else. And so even though we could prove that giving incentives for people buying long-term care would save the states and the federal government considerable money over the long term, in the short term, it would be perceived as a tax increase. And they just couldn't live with that fact. Do you find that same thing true on the state level?
Yeah, I think it's true in most politics. I mean, politicians are going to look number one, they're going to certainly look at what affects them in their particular district. Now, don't forget that all politics is local. Very often, politicians want to see an issue that's going to get them some attention. I mean, look, as much as we're beating up on politicians, of which I've been one, there are plenty of us that still will do the things we still want to do what we think is best for everybody, and we still look for things. We're not necessarily we're not bomb throwers, so to speak. I shouldn't say that after the insurrection, but a bomb thrower usually in the legislature means that they're basically out there debating all the time, yelling and screaming when they're in the legislature hearing bills, as opposed to just trying to work to get things done. And there are plenty of politicians that way, but people are always looking at what's immediate. I mean, look, the United States has always been like that. We have a tendency to not generally look long-term enough. We're always looking too short-term. It's been a problem. I don't think it's going to change. But I mean, I can tell you right now, with what's going on with my parents and from understanding the business, that long-term care is certainly an issue. Most people don't have long-term care insurance. They rely on Medicaid too often at a time. And I know that we've tried to get the U.S. Congress to come around and do more things, publicly to get more people covered, certainly to get the masses covered. But until it absolutely reaches an absolute crisis that becomes untenable, it's probably not going to happen. And I'm just, hate to tell you that, but that's just the way it is.
But I ask the question because it becomes obvious to me that the federal government is basically throwing it back to the states to do something individually. So you're in Florida, and Florida can do something for Florida residents. Oregon and Washington states did something this last year. Washington State in particular passed a 0.5% payroll tax to pay for $100,000 of long-term care for every citizen in the state. And so now they get that. Not that it's adequate enough, but at least it's something
to start
for them to have. How do we get the states to do something to amp up the reason for why individuals need to take responsibility for this?
Well, first of all, I think you got a better. I'm not telling you it's going to happen, but you certainly have a better chance with the with the new administration in Washington than you did during the previous White House occupant. Because and I'm not here to bash Donald Trump, but the way he operated basically was throw everything to the states. And, Biden has more of a thing where I think that there will be, a consensus to do things on a national basis. But you also got to take a look at insurance. And generally, insurance has been run by, the individual 50 states. So that is, probably generally why you're going to see, generally in the federal government, well, let's see the states do it. I don't know that I see, this was never on the radar, in the 8 years that I was in the legislature. And, you want to get more stuff done on long-term care insurance, you really have to get a group of people, to go and lobby for it. People have to, Peter did it, I did it before I got elected. We used to go up to Tallahassee, sometimes to Washington, and we would go around and see our elected officials and, tell them that this was a particular issue and that it was important and this is how to do it and needed to get done. Some things did happen on the state level. It's so long ago, it'd be hard for me to remember, but I do remember that when we were working on the bills that eventually made long-term care insurance have tax breaks, which a partnership plan. If you remember that, I don't know if you remember the partnership plan. That if you
very well, it's a great lead source.
Right. Well, I did quite a lot of work on that. With our other legislators, going year after, took us several years going to, Florida legislatures and talking to them and telling them why it was important, and eventually did happen. And I know that there was some push to do it on a national basis, but generally when it comes to insurance, it most times gets thrown back to the states. And insurance companies generally had wanted it that way anyway. They wanted the states to do it all independently. So, but like I said before, the Biden administration has been, you see it with the coronavirus, has been looking to have more national cohesion to get that done. So that mindset might allow within the 4 years something on long-term care also. Peter, were you involved when I know that there was a push to try to get long-term care where you could see more of it, where we would have and maybe that's what you were talking about, payroll deductions nationally, that you could do a payroll deduction that people would have long-term care, like you have Social Security or Medicare and Medicare. They may have to look at that for some.
Yeah, very much so. Through my national alliance, the National LTC Network, we certainly worked on that diligently. But it like you both say, this is a long haul. This is a tough job to get anything, particularly during a period of time where there's so much infighting about where we are going to spend whatever money we get, and the urgency for the need for today's dollars. Mark, you refer to long range planning. It's interesting because just today, within an hour of this show, I got a call from an old friend of 40 years who lost her husband about 7 years ago, and she was talking to me about whether or not she'd be eligible for long-term care insurance at 75, having experiencing now her second bout of cancer. And the fact that we are still here this many decades later, educating even people that are close to me. She admitted that I talked to her about it literally in 1983, and then in 1993 and 2003, and here we are, all these years later, and now it's too late for her. So that's a big level of frustration. The other two things I just want to mention, as long as I have the mic for the moment, is Rick, you and I have more in common than we even realize, I think. Number one, we both just this past year lost a loved one to COVID. I also have not been particularly public about it, but my brother, Bob, who was 74, only died last March in the hospital for a week. And, a rude awakening for those of you that are watching us today. This stuff, bad stuff does happen to good people, yes. and it can happen to you. So continue to be diligent and continue to be careful whether you've had a shot or not. And the other thing before the end of the show, hopefully, Rick, you'll get to talk a little bit about adoption, because as you may very well know, our younger daughter was adopted at birth, and we did get to meet her birth parents 4 years ago. So I don't want to take any more time, but I just thought I'd mention those three items.
Oh, we're definitely going to discuss that. Again, as the only non-insurance person on the show, certainly the only non long-term care insurance national expert on the show. It just staggers me. I would have to guess that if, in fact, there was a tax break or some motivation to purchase long-term care insurance, that it wouldn't save the government millions of dollars or tens of millions. It's got to be hundreds of millions or billions it would save Medicaid. So even with their 2 and 4 and 6 year outlook, like you're saying, Mark, because they're just looking to the next election. How do I get elected? I mean, I hate to say that because there are some great politicians out there. They're few and far between on both sides of the aisle, quite frank, but there are great ones out there. I just don't see how any of them don't stand up and go, wait a minute, we can save Medicare, we can save Medicaid. And when we talk about lobbying, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't the largest insurance companies in this country have some unbelievable lobbying power?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So why aren't they? I mean, I don't even know which one of you I'm asking this question to. Maybe all three. Why isn't, and I'm not picking on people, a Genworth or a MetLife using their power to go, guys, we got to sell more long-term care insurance, and here's a few ways we can do it and save Medicare and Medicaid. Why aren't the carriers doing it?
At one time they did, Mike, to be honest. At one time they did. John Hancock, Genworth, G Capital had ombudsmen in Washington who lobbied for the long-term care causes. Frankly, it just was never as important a product as, let's say, life insurance or some of the others that warranted more time. But they did have people that did it. Again, it would constantly run up against the fact that when you looked at it, the savings was much further out. The single most expensive thing, and Rick can correct this, but I'm pretty sure this is factual, the single most expensive thing in any state budget is the cost of Medicaid. And the single most expensive thing within Medicaid is the monies they lay out for long-term care. Mm-hmm. So obviously resolving the situation, like you say, would be a tremendous long-range grasp of the problem. And it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, it has to.
So, again...
there's two things.
Refer to my friend, Mr. Gelbach.
Most of the major carriers have withdrawn from the market, so it's really too late for them to be counted upon. They just lost their shirts. I know no one wants to feel bad for insurance carriers, but they had a lot of poor planning. Their actuaries, underwriters made a lot of mistakes, and then that combined with this sustained low interest rate environment created the perfect storm. So depending on the carrier, to get anything done at this point is not going to happen on a go-forward basis with so few major carriers left. There were attempts. I guess the partnership plans were the best thing that took place. That did happen on a state-by-state basis. But this is also a tightrope that they're walking from a carrier perspective, because they don't want to just do away with the need for private long-term care insurance, and nor do they believe that a governmental run program for all of long-term care needs would make sense or would be affordable. But it's not an issue that we can depend on at this point. And I think the fact that there is product in the marketplace available that people should be researching, because it has changed dramatically. Mark certainly can talk to this issue because he's involved in it on a day-by-day basis. But we're not here today, I don't think, to get down and dirty about the specifics of long-term care insurance. I'd rather hear about more topics with Rick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No doubt. So before we go to talk about this next topic, I say this light. I thought I was going to say it lightly, but I sort of mean it. Thanks to you guys, of course. I'm very familiar with the 3 and 4 endeavor and how powerful that was. Might be time for a 62 Who Knew endeavor. Maybe it's time to go back to Washington and say, what the hell is happening here? I mean, especially based on what we've seen in COVID-19 and I know I'm just preaching to the choir, but to our audience.
Oh no, I hope you have enough meds to manage the anxiety and frustration that will come from that effort,
I know.
having been there and tried it.
It's a rough one. Well, I know who I want to be the next president, and we've never discussed this, and we might not discuss it now, but I'm hoping that somebody that's going to be president in the next 4 to 8 years. I know this is an important topic to her. Notice I'm saying her, and I'm really hoping she's going to be president in the next 4 to 8 years. But that's for another show. You are doing something very, very interesting and very, very close to home to a lot of people, including Peter. As he said, his younger daughter, Marjorie, was adopted. I think she's Wonder Woman, so I thought her father was, half God, because I thought it was Zeus, to be honest with you. But I guess she found out she actually had an earthling for a father, so I was a little amazed at that. But you're trying to do something very special because I know you were adopted yourself. Please expand on that for us.
Well, I was adopted when I was 3 months old, and I always knew. I mean, I really credit my adoptive parents. They never held back on it. They always, they told me from day one. And meanwhile, I did have somebody I went to high school with. She didn't find out she was adopted until she was in her 30s. Which is not the right way to do things. That's devastating for an adult.
Yes.
To find out that things were not as you thought that they were. But most adoptees that I know have a certain curiosity. Where did I come from? Is it real that they tell you when you're young that you were adopted, but sometimes you almost don't believe it until you really find out. But most of us want to know about our genetic history. Some people just will never take the opportunity to do it. Some people a little bit too frightened to do it. But I just always wanted to know, at least certainly when I got older, where I came from. And later on, I've actually found that there was a whole group of, because I didn't know it to begin with, whole group of people that were doing searches. There were organizations that did this. And also, after 2 terms in the State House, I actually was at a national conference of legislators, and at that time found out that there was legislation going on by adoptees who were state legislators in other states, some of whom have actually gotten stuff passed. And so I became very interested in that and worked on that. But the last 4 years I was in the State House. I did get a bill passed last year, which was the first time the state has done a bill in favor of adoptees as opposed to not in favor of adoptees in probably 30 years or more. And I do have a bill again this year, even though I'm not elected. I do have a member of the Florida House and of the Florida Senate who are going to advance that bill for me. And I hope I'm not getting really off topic.
No,
but,
you're not.
I mean, basically, let's look at it this way, okay? I was able to find out where I came from, and really where I came from. I have met my birth parents. I do have a set of brothers from the same union of my birth parents. They later married after I was adopted and had more children. And my adoptive parents have actually met some members of my birth family. So it's kind of a very interesting thing.
Absolutely.
It was very interesting actually doing the search, which happened before DNA testing and before the advent of the internet. But very often, and we see this in so many different kind of things with legislation and the way legislatures work, the reality of where technology is and where adoption is in searches today is a lot different than sometimes the perception of those people in the legislature. People like me, I'd like a copy of my very original birth certificate that comes from, before I was adopted. Those birth certificates are almost in all cases changed to have your adoptive parents' names on there. So certain things are changed on the birth certificate. And so there's a term called OBC, Original Birth Certificate, and there's been a movement nationwide for many, many years for adoptees to be able to get that what we call our simple piece of paper. which doesn't seem like a big deal to most people, but it's a big deal to people like me who would actually like to see what it looks like, even though I know who my birth family is. And legislatures are just very slow to getting around with it. They've got many excuses. There are very strong lobbying groups who are not interested in adoptees being able to get that information. And it's really kind of interesting in the day where, through DNA, there's such a good chance that you're going to find out who the people are on your original birth family, and all roads are going to somehow lead to Rome, in this case, to your original birth family. That, amazes me that a legislature, for example, Florida, or many of the other ones, California, Texas, have no interest in it. They come up with all sorts of things. I've heard, you're going to like this one, if the law changes, more birth mothers are going to have abortions. And they're going to have abortions because they're going to know that those adoptees are going to come looking for them. And to which I have to always explain, no, we just want that piece of paper. In some cases, they may or may not looking for birth parents. They just may want that piece of paper, or they may want genetic history because they need to know medical conditions. And they don't necessarily need that to find their original family.
Exactly.
But these are the myths that still are there. Also, just my last thing, and I'll say this, so let you ask some questions. But in the state of Florida, the adoption lobby, when I say that, I mean the adoption lawyers, in most cases are adamantly opposed to this. I can't tell you exactly why, because I don't feel that they're going to lose being able to have children adopted just because some children are looking for that their original birth parents, or for their birth certificate only, or for medical information. But very often they feel that way. And I had to spend, and I enjoy doing it, but 4 years educating members of the legislature to where I was able to actually get something passed last year. But now we're looking to get a stronger bill passed this year.
Congratulations. Well, yeah, again, when you get back to scientific and medical breakthroughs of these last few decades, being able to find out your birth parents and know if there's any precursors, whether it be diabetes or heart disease or cancer. It's not just emotion; it's science as well. Again, it staggers me that anybody wouldn't. I mean, I sort of understand. I don't agree that more people get abortions. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. And I'm sure maybe there might be a case here and there. But with today's technology, you send in some of your, they're just too easy to find now. Why they would want to deny someone that piece of paper to give them their mental and emotional satisfaction is staggering to me. I don't know, Peter, if you want to share anything with what Marjorie went through, or if she doesn't want you to, or what you feel about that.
I'd be happy to just take a couple of minutes. So we were blessed to be able to adopt Marjorie right from the hospital when she was only 3 days old. So, and like with Rick's folks, we shared the fact that Marjorie was adopted from the earliest days, that she could understand and comprehend that. It's been an amazing experience to have both Julie and Marjorie, and be able to interact with the two of them the same, and yet be treating them as individuals that they are. Marjorie was always convinced, until she was probably a young adult, that somehow we were so bonded and so connected in so many ways that she came to me one day. I know this is going to sound funny, but she said, "Dad, I can handle it. I assume that you had an affair with a beautiful Hawaiian girl," because Marjorie has Hawaiian heritage. And, but I know that you're my birth father, which wasn't the case at all. But in any case, 4 years ago, through Ancestry.com, we were able to connect with Marjorie's birth mother. And she has a birth sister and brother. And it became very much a blended family. And in fact, her birth sister wrote a book recently and included us in the book. And showed pictures of us, and the story is included in that book. So from our standpoint, our lives were just enriched. They were enhanced. They were certainly. It was important to Marjorie to do the same thing that Rick was searching for, some answers from a genetic standpoint, but also just that basic question. Not that she was unhappy, not that she was depressed, not that she had conflict, but just the unknown answers that she now has, and made her feel and made us all feel somewhat better. Yes, there are adjustments that have to be made. Yes, there are certain kinds of things that you didn't expect that might happen in terms of the new sharing of this beautiful person and her children, of course, but certainly a lot more pluses and minuses. On the other side of the coin, I do respect the fact that there are delicate privacy issues that people are dealing with that might not feel comfortable, and that is why it's kind of a hard job for Rick to accomplish what he wants to. I think that is one legitimate reason. The respect for privacy today is probably greater than it's ever been, and so that is a delicate balancing act. But from a standpoint of going through the experience, certainly I'm not the only one in my family, or Marjorie is not the only. My brother was able to also adopt a baby, and so was my sister-in-law, Sharon's sister. So we have multiple people and others within our family without going into more detail. But so we're finding out. The one thing we did find out, and I don't know if this is true for you, Rick, but once it was announced and once we started sharing this and making it public years and years ago, we found that there were a lot more adopted people out there than we realized. Yeah. So this is not just some small segment of the population. I don't know if that's been your experience, Rick, but we had a lot of people coming forward saying, well, they were adopted or they adopted someone.
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, you just never know. I mean, we've had, while I was in Tallahassee, we had several members of the legislature who were adoptees. And, they certainly, some of them helped, with the legislation. But most people in the public, and including our legislatures, really do not necessarily understand the topic of adoption, really what it's all about. There are certain, myths about adoption. Certainly we talk about privacy, but the reality is that, if you get somebody that wants to do a search, I mean, you can't guarantee any, privacy. Somebody's going to look, they're going to look. So that was my
now today in particular.
Yeah, right. But that's my contention with the state is why do you need to hide the birth certificate, the original one? People want to find you, they're going to find you anyway, with or without that birth certificate. Certainly now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no hiding now. And just as I think, Mark, did you have a question? I just have a side note. I thought you were going to say something.
Go ahead with your side note.
Yeah, just a quick side note. There's no doubt, Peter, you've been honored by a lot of people. You've been mentioned by a lot of people. You've been complimented by a lot of people. You were Man of the Year years ago to that beautiful ceremony where everybody spoke, and Marjorie and oh my God, where everybody was in tears. No, I knew Julie's saying we were just all in tears. But I have to say, and I think you'll agree, when Marjorie said, "You have to be my birth father," probably one of the biggest compliments a human being could get.
It was.
Yeah, absolutely, positively. Go ahead, Mark.
And Michael, that's my comment.
Yeah.
Now that we know that he had an affair with a Hawaiian woman,
yes,
we should use that to move ourselves up on the list, because both of us were on the short list to be adopted by Peter.
You're already on my short list. I don't know about
that's right.
Well, the fact that he walked around the house a lot in a Hawaiian shirt singing Tiny Bubbles, that didn't help a lot.
Yeah, no.
And none of the
young on today, I want you to know.
Yeah, and none of the young people.
Look, it's a wonderful thing you both did by adopting it. They say that it's one thing. There's no greater blessing than to have a child, but when you choose a child,
that's right,
like you two did, that's an even higher honor and compliment.
That love is a staggering love, because it's we all have relatives that we'd rather not have. I'll just say it. I love them all, but There's a lot of my relatives I just don't like, but I love them truly. But when you have something like that, like you're talking about, where you choose to love them, and that love actually never goes away, it just keeps getting stronger. That is a staggering bond.
Hey, Mike, I know it's your show, but I'd love to see, I'm looking at the clock, and I'd love to hear Rick talk about this coming year and what he's seeing, and maybe some potential and also some dangers that even though he's not active, he's still involved. So I'd love to hear, we've got only 5 minutes left. So
yeah, go.
Thereabouts.
Well, I mean, I never gave up my business, so I am still actively marketing insurance. Of course, with Transamerica pulling out of the market, we certainly don't have too many more individual carriers in the standalone market, but there are still opportunities to market long-term care insurance. But there will be other things politically. I've been an activist at heart for a very long time. Now, will I run for office again? I know time will tell. I don't know. In the short run, probably not. But I am planning in Broward County. When I was in the state house, I ran an organization within the legislature called the Jewish Legislative Caucus. And just like there's a Black caucus and a Hispanic caucus, we worked bills and legislation in conjunction with the other groups, on things that were important for Jewish Americans and Jewish Floridians. And so I have been, and I will most likely be heading up a Jewish caucus group here in Broward County. Now, I am with the Democratic Party, and I am probably going to do that as a Democratic caucus in Broward. And certainly one of the goals is going to be working with the Black caucus, the Hispanic caucus, like I did in Tallahassee, but also we're very strong on America's relation to the state of Israel. I'm going to continue to work on that. But I'm going to continue to work on insurance issues. I've already been asked by current members of the Florida legislature to weigh in on insurance legislation. I'm certainly going to continue to be an activist for issues regarding adoptees. Representative Emily Schlossberg in the State House and Senator Linda Stewart in the Senate will be sponsoring a bill regarding a rollback on the law on adoptees not being able to get their original birth certificates. We're going to try to roll back that law as much as we can to where it used to be. There was a time up through the 1970s and 80s where if a adoptee wanted to contact the Bureau of Vital Statistics and request a copy of their birth certificate, they were able to get it. And there have been court cases on this, and so I'm going to continue to work on that as well. But the other thing that's going to be very, very important for me, my mother, who is not well, she is getting better, but it's going to be very important for me in the short run to be making sure that she's taken care of properly, gets better, and that's going to be something that I'm going to have to in the short run work on. I'm glad that they were able to stay healthy through my 8 years. My folks were able to stay healthy in the 8 years I was in the legislature, but now it's time. I mean, they both made it to their 90s, and my dad close to 101. So that's going to be an extremely important thing for me to take care of. And don't forget about my regular family that I got to take care of as well. My wife of over 40 years, Debbie, who has really been terrific. And I haven't talked about her, but she really is terrific herself out in the community. And I've got two great kids that have done very well for themselves. So, a family has always been very important to me.
Of course. That's fantastic. Yeah, that is absolutely
Hey, Mike,
fantastic to hear. Go ahead, Peter.
If your viewing audience has questions for Rick, do you suggest that they contact him directly or through the show?
Good lead-in and good reminder to the ignorant host.
Thank you.
That's why I have you every week now, so you can do things like that. We did put up Rick's website before, but please go to 62 Who Knew if you have any comments to make or questions for Rick. You can ask them there. You can email me directly at mbanner@62whoknew.com and ask the questions, and I will forward them to Rick. I know I have questions that I'm going to ask, and I'm not sure you're aware of this, Rick, because this is your first time on. We just got about a minute and a half, but Mark and Peter and another name you're familiar with, Bill Comfort, and a few other large associations. We're in the process of putting something together that is going to be introduced on a national level by the end of the second quarter of this year, which is a massive financing option. I shouldn't say a massive financing option, a financing option for people 60 years old and above to finance long-term care insurance, being able to get it out to the masses, to, quite frankly, millions and millions of people who otherwise couldn't afford it. And I'm very excited about that project, and that Peter and Mark and Bill Comfort are in. And in the remaining 45 seconds before I say a quick goodbye, when you are working with the Jewish caucus to get things done, could you possibly try and have a bill that forces Chinese restaurants to stay open 24 hours? Because I think this would be a tremendous help to the Jewish community.
Yes.
We'll start,
and they must serve mushu pork. That's probably that's all the Jews want, mushu pork.
This
so
idea of closing.
Isn't it the more important that they always stay open on Christmas?
Well, that's what we got to have something to do. Yes, they all do for that. 15 seconds left. Thank you to our 62 Who Knew family, which is Peter and Mark. I hope this is the first of many times that we see you, Rick. And when COVID-19 goes by, I look forward to breaking bread with you. Thank you, everybody.
Good job, Rick.
Thank you.